Hello, and welcome to our session on 3 pillars of succession, part 1. The good news is, even though there are 3 parts, they're all standalone. So each one is meant for its own value. So if you think of someone you'd like to share this one with or have them watch the recording, but they don't get a chance until they attend number 2 or number 3, that's fine. This is actually a segment or an excerpt of a much longer presentation that I frequently do with business leaders. And the official title is actually "You're Tired, Your Key Leaders Are Aging Out or Maxed Out, and We're in the Middle of a Great Resignation. Now what?" Today, we're going to be focused on the "You're Tired" or exhausted or drained or whatever you want to call it piece. It typically applies to all leaders, but most frequently we're hearing this from the primary business owner or the founder. If you are not that person in your organization, but you hear some of those same comments, this can still apply, and perhaps you can help that person with some of the things that they're challenged with. I know the meeting invitation for this webinar suggested about an hour. It's probably going to be closer to 20 to 30 minutes of content and then some Q&A if we need to go past that, but it is very unlikely that it'll take an entire hour. So good news for you, you're going to get some time back in your day. And how often does that happen? When it comes to a little housekeeping, you're obviously all muted through the majority of this. If there's something you want to put in chat, John, both my husband and business partner, is manning or monitoring the chat for us. And if you have specific questions you'd like to ask, either at Q&A at the end or throughout, feel free to put them in the question box and John will relay that or share that with everybody as he sees those come in. With that being said, I'm going to get rid of the picture of me and let's get to the presentation itself. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the 3 pillars of succession. And the first piece is really about the founder or the CEO. As we're talking to a lot of our clients these days, we're really hearing things like, "Oh my God, I am so exhausted. I don't have the energy to do this anymore. This isn't why I started my business. This isn't fun anymore." Those are some of the comments. If you haven't said them out loud and you're the business owner, but you know they're real, no, I did not tap into your phone like the CDC did. I just actually am hearing that face to face and sometimes doing a little mind reading or listening to my own mind as a business owner. So we are seeing some of that. And again, we are focused on the 3 pillars, and we'll talk a little bit about those when we talk about senior leadership maxing out or aging out, which is going to be our next session. As I mentioned, that's going to be on July 20th, and the key talent is going to be on August 17th. When it comes to senior management, you know, maxing out or aging out is what we're really dealing with. And when we're talking about key talent, we're not just talking about the Great Resignation as it's referred to, but also as I referred to it as the Great Reshuffle. Sorry about that. I should warn you that we are using brand new software today and with the GoToWebinar. And I don't expect there to be any problems, but in case there are, thank you for your patience in advance. We are in the middle of a perfect storm. We are facing things as leaders that nobody has ever faced all at the same time before. I don't care if you've had the world's greatest mentor, nobody can go up to your great mentor and say, "Hey, the last time you went through a pandemic, what did you," right? That's just not going to happen. There are a lot of things, and actually we introduced this slide about 5 months before the official shutdown. And you can imagine how many times some of the bullets in here have changed. And I want to review some of these because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And as we talk first about our at-home workers, there are a lot of challenges that brings to play. A lot of it is around being able to manage or hold those people accountable. I don't care if you are the most trusting person on earth. I don't care if you have the world's greatest leaders, something is happening when you cannot see that person sitting in this seat next to you or walking by their cubicle or their office. There's a part of you that's thinking, they're not really working full time. They're not giving it their all. How do I know that they're really getting things done? And then we start seeing things like software coming in that's measuring someone's keystrokes or the extent to which their eyes drift off of their screen and things like this. My cousin is actually has been dealing with this for well over a year, and it'll give her a yellow if she's only quasi active, and then it goes red if she's dormant. And so they expect that when she's taking her lunch break, but they don't expect that at other times. And that's causing a lot of distrust and disharmony among organizations. We're even hearing from employees who have had fabulous relationships with their supervisors who said, I never had a problem with this before. And now I feel like everything I do is being questioned and my integrity is in question. And that's making them feel not only not trusted, but not trusting back. We're also realizing, of course, that there's a lot of disengagement. There just isn't that collaboration that there was before. And it makes it very difficult to lead somebody when you can't just pick up some of the subtleties. When we all worked together and we would see someone walk in and maybe the pace wasn't the same or their shoulders were a little droopy, we'd say, hey, is everything okay? And that changed how we were demonstrating our empathy towards our coworkers as well as our direct reports. It makes it very difficult to lead these people because we can't read some of the stuff. Even if you're on Zoom with them all the time, you're only getting this much of me, right? So you're not seeing my pace of work, my pace of walking. You're not really being able to observe me in action. And I can put on a good face for a half hour, an hour, however long is our meeting, but then afterwards, I might be putting forth a different face to those around me, including my dogs, who might be sharing my home office with me. It's also certainly difficult to groom these people if they're not able to observe your leadership by example. So that at-home workers piece is really difficult. Aging workforce, we'll speak to this a little bit more when we really get into the second session. And we know, though, that this is happening, right? We know the baby boomers are almost out. The X generation is starting to exit, and we just have not been producing enough humans for the last several decades. And so we have a lot of that aging workforce that we're dealing with and we're trying to prepare for. We also then talk about our COVID coma, as I refer to it. There's a lot of stuff that's just gotten us into a funk, even though thankfully, we're mask free and it's considered safe to be mask free and we can interact with each other. There's still some things that are carrying over from the big shutdown that we had, the cancel culture. It's no big deal, right, to cancel a meeting or no show for a meeting because it's just on Zoom. Or because we got so comfortable with that all the time, just no showing. We're seeing that with candidates who are no showing. We're now located in just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, and a couple of months ago, Wendy's was offering a $50 bonus if you showed up for an interview. $50, show up for an interview. I heard of people who had full-time jobs who had no intention of leaving, but thought $50 is $50, I'll go to an interview. But that's how desperate people were getting. We're also seeing what I'm calling the young parents panic. It's really difficult. This is probably something that's kind of bleeding into the Great Resignation because these are folks that are actually resigning. And we saw this with some of our younger employees. We saw this certainly with our own kids. When you have multiple kids under the age of 5, and they're all supposed to be in daycare, and mom and dad are working from home, and one of the kids, members of his class or member of the group came in contact with COVID, everybody had to quarantine. So that meant your kid came home, whether or not he was one of the ones that was in contact. And it's not like you can just hand them some paperwork and say, honey, can you go work on this for 2 hours while mommy takes a phone call? You just can't do that with a 3-year-old. your house will be a disaster. And potentially the child as well, but you can't do that. And then about the time the 3-year-old goes back to school, then the 4-year-old is sent home because somebody in their class got exposed to some COVID. And so the parents are constantly dealing with both of them trying to work and having to actually parent at the same time. And so eventually the parents look at each other and says, oh my God, we can't deal with this. One of us has to stay home. Just one of us has to be home because neither of us is getting a lot of work done this way. And so then we are having the one of them gives up their job, the other's trying to bring down the income for the family. And that's certainly causing a lot of a challenge for folks. The other thing about the COVID coma is we're seeing a lot of the capacity for people to think big picture declining significantly. You'll hear frequently from people who are working remotely, hybrid, or completely, that I am so much more productive when I'm home. Well, generally speaking, that means they're getting stuff off their list. They're checking things off their list, they're getting it done. That tends to be incredibly tactical. It is not strategic in nature at all. We're finding that the ability to get to the really important things that are not urgent is not happening. And when the part of the brain that focuses on the strategic or the big picture is not used, it'll atrophy like any other muscle. And so we're seeing this big picture capacity really get lost. Similarly, innovation is dropping. If I have a great idea and I walk into somebody's office and I say, oh, Diane, I got to tell you about this great idea. And she builds off of my energy. She's like, what? And we muscle through it and it's exciting. But now I have this great idea and gosh, I don't want to just call her because maybe she's getting ready for a Zoom meeting. So I'll text her. Is she available? Oh, no, she's not. But she asked me if I'm available at 3. Nope, I'm not available at 3, but I could probably do 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we all settle on 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and by then that idea is gone, or the energy around it's gone. It's completely different. And you listen to any of the significant business thought leaders like Simon Sinek, Jim Collins, Pat Lencioni, all of them are really saying it's innovation that is going to hurt us worldwide, because we have collaboration going down and we have that collision time really going down that cannot be fabricated by planned meetings. And finally, of course, the level of engagement with an organization, engagement with your culture, really feeling that connectivity is really going down. I'm not going to give too many specifics, as you might imagine, but the political discord that's out there is seeping into the workforce. You're crazy if you think it's not happening. Everything somebody does, do they wear a mask, do they not wear a mask? What colors are they wearing, what colors are they not wearing? What shoes are they wearing? Are they wearing makeup or not? Do they color their hair anymore? All of these things are really being interpreted, right, wrong, or indifferent, as a political statement. And so that's creating some divisions, whether you're working remotely and some of these things can be seen, or you're working in the workplace. And of course, we have the Great Resignation, which I'm thinking is really more the Great Reshuffle. We'll talk about that more in our third pillar, and that's going to be on August 17th, remember. But it's really more the Great Reshuffle right now, but the Great Resignation is taking place, I believe, with the young parent panic, and as well as some of the aging workforce. Certainly we're seeing that decline. So all of these things are hitting us all at the same time, on top of all the regular things that hit us, and it feels sometimes like we're playing whack-a-mole. Just when we think we've figured something else out, something else pops up over here, and we're just exhausted trying to chase all these things and figure these things out. This isn't why we started our business. We wanted to, you know, for the Metiss Group, we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to help people align their talent to their business goals and really grow and achieve. And we're busy doing all of this other stuff so much as business leaders. It feels like the real difference we're making for our clients may not be as significant as it perhaps once was. So as we talk about this succession planning, you know, again, we talked about it from the founder or the CEO getting exhausted. We're talking about other leaders aging out or maxing out, and then that Great Resignation. part of the reason this has become so significant for us is because we have to plan in advance. We have such a depleted labor pool, and people are complaining about it now, but we're forgetting what it was prior to March of 2020. In March of 2020, we had marked the 25th month where we had unreasonable unemployment. So anytime our unemployment drops below 4.5%, it's considered unnatural low. And that means we're employing the unemployable, people who are not physically capable of keeping a full-time job, emotionally not capable, just don't want to. So we're trying to employ those, and we were below 4.5% for over 25 months. Towards the end of that, we were about at 3.6%, which is exactly where we're at right now. But if it feels harder right now, it probably is because of some of those folks who have completely left the workforce. So the percentage of availability has shrunk as well. So, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if somebody were retiring or leaving an organization, you just go buy the next person that you needed out on the street. That's not available right now. So we have to plan. We have to look at some of the folks we have. We have to do some planning. We can't burn out all of these folks who are leading these organizations. But I have talked to some of our colleagues who run merger and acquisition organizations and some of our clients who do the same. There are plenty of small business owners who are really just putting their businesses up for sale because it's just the only way out that they can see. I'm sure you've all seen this matrix before. Of course, we have our level of importance down in the x-axis and our urgency up at the y. And I always ask folks when we're doing interactive sessions, okay, which quadrant do we really spend most of our time? And of course, it's really in the urgent and important. That's always what's going to draw our attention. But when I ask, where then do we spend our next amount of time, everybody fesses up and says it's probably the really urgent, not so important stuff. That's all those people bopping in your office going, got a minute? And those emails that we get and those lovely texts, those texts that must be answered the moment they come in. In fact, you're probably answering some of them now while you're on the webinar. So when do we get to the really important but not urgent stuff? I would argue if it's really important, especially if it's people related and you ignore it long enough, it's going to become urgent. So the fact that you're making time for this webinar today, you're planning for success, you're working on some of those things that are really important, not urgent. Hopefully that'll reduce the number of the urgent and important stuff that you have to deal with, or at least make it a little bit easier to deal with as we move forward. A little bit of background on the Metiss Group for those of you who don't know us, though it seemed like there were many past and current clients with us, as well as some potentially future clients. As many of you know, it was 26 years ago when I founded the business in Metro Detroit. After growing the business there for about 10 years, John and I decided we would expand the business, and after about a year of analysis, we decided to expand it into the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So for the next 15 years, we commuted back and forth by car every month. John said, I think it's over 300 trips we made as we expanded the business. And while we were concentrated in Detroit and Charlotte, we had, last time we looked, we had about 20% of our clients in the Midwest, if you think between Milwaukee and Detroit, about 40% in the Carolinas, and the rest is all over really North America. And some of you may recognize a lot of these logos, some of them may be yours. We've been in Charlotte full-time now for a little over a year, but we still have wonderful team members still in the Detroit market as well as Charlotte. And if you know any other great folks who might want to join us, there's some job postings out there. We're looking for an assistant to John, and we're looking for another fabulous senior advisor. If you know anybody who's a great student of human behavior, as we say. So when we look at the founder or the CEO, we realize they have decisions in front of them if they are just too tired to keep going on. And generally the ones that they see are that they can retire, they can sell the business, or they can just walk away. Well, let's pretend that none of those are really the options that you want to consider. We've had some clients, I remember one who John and I were just saying is probably in his late 30s, early 40s, who called me and he said, somebody said I had to talk to you. I'm working too hard. I got nothing left. I'm empty. I got nothing. I can't keep going like this. And I'm thinking, you're like decades younger than I am. How is it you got nothing left? He said, we got to find somebody. And he was an implementer of EOS. He considered himself a visionary. He said, if I don't find an integrator to run all of this, I am going to collapse. It just can't keep going like this. We had another gentleman has been working with us for ages in upstate New York, and he had a really unusual health issue where he had an unusual, not the typical ringing of the ears that wouldn't stop, to the point where the distraction level was so significant, it was too difficult for him to work day in and day out. And so he had to scramble to find solutions. And one of our favorite stories is someone local here to Charlotte who said, I need to spend more time on the beach. I don't want to be running the day-to-day stuff. I just need to spend more time on the beach. And, so as they were facing all of these things, one of the things that these folks realized is I need a number two. I need a number two who has the energy or gets energy back from running the day-to-day. Typically, the CEO or the founder is the visionary. They have all this energy and they're capitalizing on new opportunities, and managing the day-to-day is just draining. So, but where do you start when you're going through this? If you tap into your handouts, now, if you didn't already download your handouts, you may do so in the control panel of your webinar. You should see it there. If not, go ahead and ask a question about that, and John might be able to give more clarity as to where it's at. But this is one of the worksheets I'd like you to spend some time with, or those of you who are working with a CEO who you think is haunted by these same things, put this sheet in front of them. And we're going to go to our chat a little bit. I'd like you to think about this, and let's start with this first column. For those of you who are business owners or CEOs, what are the job activities you're doing right now that you really enjoy? For those of you who are not the CEO or business primary business leader, but you see your CEO getting fatigued, give us an idea. What are some of the activities you think the CEO of your organization likes? And go ahead and just chat them right now, and then John will read some of those out for us.
Got working on strategy. We got a onboarding new talent. We got another one on strategy. Going to community events. I like that one.
Those make sense?
Anything else?
Let's go to the chat again, and let's think. I bet this list is going to be longer. What are some of the activities you don't like doing? Or what are some of the things that if you see your CEO doing them, you can say, oh, I can tell he'd rather eat worms, or she would rather eat worms rather than doing this? What are some of those activities? Go ahead and populate that in the chat.
Administration we got as
Administrivia, yes. What else besides administration?
Managing timesheets is a.
Oh my gosh, that should never be in a CEO.
Dealing with people issues is a headache. HR issues is another one. Dealing with building leases and management.
Oh, yeah.
So day-to-day kind of stuff. Operation issues.
I know when it comes to small business owners, the thought of dealing with all the insurance stuff and choosing the benefits and the payroll, especially if you don't have the luxury of having some of the fabulous HR people that are on this webinar. Anything else?
No.
All right.
Mostly day-to-day type of.
Most of the day-to-day stuff. So when you think about that CEO, if they had the time to do the things that they should be doing, what do you think there's some things they should add to the things they're doing if they had the time? And if you could add that into the chat, that would be great. What are some activities you should add? Sometimes we hear it is some community outreach.
We got assisting key sales opportunities.
Oh, for sure, right?
We got community outreach, one somebody should add. We got strategy meetings with the executive team, as
Yeah.
an activity that should be added. Planning for future. We got downloading knowledge to the next level.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. All right. And then, of course, I think we need to leave this column for that leader themselves to fill out, which, what are some activities I wish I could do, wish I had time to do, that we may not even be seeing them doing that. So what we generally suggest is to make time to go through this, have the senior leader go through this, and after they feel like they've filled it out, and they may need to circle back to it for a couple of days, ask other people to add to the list of things that they think that they're seeing. We know that when we are trying to build out a scorecard that I'll mention in a little bit, I'll show you in a little bit, and including other people, I have to tell you, it's a little humbling for people who have reported to you to share with you the things that you really bring value to. They do not underestimate a lot of the value that you bring, but you may assume that if it comes easy to you, it comes easy to everybody else, and it is really humbling and a true gift to hear some of the things. You may also want to explore, if you've just been caught up in the day-to-day for so long, you can't even think straight about this stuff anymore. There is a book called Unique Ability 2.0. It's by Catherine Nomura. Catherine is spelled with a C, and Nomura is N as in Nancy, O-M-U-R-A. That could be a wonderful thing for CEOs or actually any leader to go through, to really try to figure out what the unique ability is that you're bringing to the organization and to others that also returns energy to you. So some of the things that we find are pretty common among CEO functions are things like ambassadorship, strategy, really focusing on the culture. I didn't hear too much of that. Maybe it's just taken for granted, because I know we had one coming through. Overseeing the business at a higher level, and something we call mad scientist, which is really being that visionary, coming up with the next fabulous whatever that is. It is pretty unusual to see business owners with a lot of clarity about their role. And we know this because of some of the assessments we use, specifically in the Hartman profile. The higher up in an organization a leader is, the more regularly their internal view is just a mess, because they spend far more time trying to figure out how to manage the world in which they operate, and far less time contemplating their existence. It's all about, really, to some extent, self-sacrifice for the business that they created or that they're running. So we have proof that frequently that the clarity around what's expected in the role is very different. So what if you had a number two? First of all, what would we call that? We are seeing all kinds of titles these days. CEOs frequently have COOs, presidents are frequently having chief of staff right now, or vice president. We're hearing integrators, general managers, and of course somebody from the military wanted to have an aide-de-camp. So you can call it whatever you wish. It's more important the content that you put on that and the clarity that you put into that role. One of the things that I found when I've been presenting this, and we have a lot of interaction among business leaders of all levels in an organization, is it seems that the CEO feels guilty to bring on a number two to handle some of the day-to-day. It's my baby. I started this thing. I gotta be able to be the one that's going to run it, to grow it. What does it say about me if I am not that person? Well, we thought it'd be helpful for you to take a little look at these famous number ones and twos: Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, Henry Ford and Harold Willis, Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, Bezos and Andy Jassy. I don't think anybody would accuse any of those number ones as being lightweights or giving up on their business because they brought in a stellar number two. So please don't think of this as something that you have to feel guilty about. It's the best thing you can do for your business and everybody else in your business, to bring somebody in who can handle that day to day so that you can be doing the things that really brought energy to you. When we are working on trying to define the number two role, the first thing we do is we start by defining the founder, the CEO's role. Real quick, go into your chat and tell us, why do you think we would start with the CEO's role first before defining the integrator? Anybody giving us any guesses, or do we stump them right out of the gate?
We start with the CEO first.
Yes.
That's one of the.
Oh, that's one of the responses. Okay. Well, there's a variety of reasons. First of all, we find that intellectually, most CEOs are thrilled with the idea of letting somebody else handle all the day-to-day stuff. I only have to have one direct report. I'll have that second in command be my direct report. Everybody else can report to that person. I can do all the fun stuff. Intellectually, this sounds fabulous. And then emotionally, when the number two shows up, oh, well, wait a minute. If I give you this stuff, then what am I supposed to do? This is my identity. This is what I've always done. The heck am I supposed to do next? So there's questions around, what will I do? If there's no clarity between the number one and the number two role, there can be lots of duplication of efforts. We also need to get the buy-in of your direct reports. I can't tell you how many times we've gone in to define the CEO's role, and everybody else learns they're going to report to the chief of staff, and there'll be people sitting around the room, and this happened one time very directly. We said, okay, here's the reporting structure. Mark is going to have one direct report, and everybody else is going to report to Mark. And we actually had the head of marketing sit back, fold her arms, and say, well, everybody else can report to the integrator, but I'm still going directly to Mark. And Mark said, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be at the beach. You can't call me. So, but by defining what the CEO is going to be doing in the future, as well as what the second in command was going to do, the buy-in was tremendous, because in the absence of information, people will make stuff up, and the stuff they make up will blow your mind. So the things that they're thinking about is, you're bringing in an integrator because you think somebody has to micromanage me. No, I'm bringing in an integrator because I'm not doing the stuff the business needs me to do, and the stuff that I am doing, I don't do all that great because it doesn't return energy to me. So to give you an example, we have a scorecard. This is just a segment of a particular scorecard that we created for a local CEO. He happens to run a hospitality business, and his culture is incredibly important to him. So as culture champion, he is directing the architecture and design of the facilities because it's that consumer experience, championing the brand and the culture, participating in key interviews because he really doesn't want to lose that culture. And he knows as he tries to expand and build out another business, he is fearful that the culture will get diluted. He also needs to conduct skip level meetings to make sure that the culture is contained. And he wants to influence the overall aesthetic. Of course, he also wants to be focusing on the strategy and growth. What's the sales footprint? Where are we going to expand? Setting a vision, participating in all of the strategy sessions. And you can see a little bit of the ambassador piece down there, which is where he's acting as the ABC company's ambassador, including meeting with legislators who can impact the expansion of his business, other key relationships, whether they're financial or sales or vendor related. He's still maintaining a lot of that. One of his other accountability categories is actually that mad scientist one. He loves to tinker in the thing that their business is most known for. So once you get clarity around what we need and want this CEO to do in the future, then we can build out what the number two's scorecard is going to be like. And their categories may be like everything else that the CEO isn't doing, or the number one person, managing the day-to-day, executing on the strategy that the number one and two and the executive team together have created, managing the talent, being the primary liaison to number one. And there's typically, depending on the size of the company, there are some companies where that's enough. Other times there'll be one category that we just call the do it bucket. So, and it's different for each person. So if the CEO happens to have a strong financial background, well, it'd be kind of silly for this person to also do CFO stuff. If the CEO came from a sales background, he may still tinker in sales. So having maybe the number two not have an emphasis in sales, but maybe that's when they have more of an emphasis in finance or operations. And the same is true in other things. So every number one is different, which means every number two is different. And some of the number twos will have their own do it category where they own the vice president of sales or the CFO role or something like that. And for the number two to the person I just showed you, their first priority is Team ABC Company. This is really leading the team from a core values perspective, making sure there's interdepartmental collaboration, leading company communications, everything that we need. Again, you can tell how clear the culture is to this organization. And then, of course, the talent management, which is different than overseeing the business. So overseeing the business, maybe overseeing the tasks and activities done by the direct reports, but leveraging the talent is around the person in those roles. So think of the overseeing the business as not changing no matter who's in the roles. And the talent management is really around grooming those who are in the roles. And that's going to be different based on the potential and the capacity of each individual reporting to you. We have a couple of examples of some one and twos. So this is from Engot Search Group. Mark Engot wanted to be the face of ASC 60% of the time. By the way, much of that is on the golf course. He also does a lot of public speaking. They are a search firm. They do a lot in finance, so he speaks to a lot of those groups. And then, of course, working with the team and doing strategy and planning. The president and CEO, which happens to be his nephew, who's been groomed into this role, is going to have the bulk of the rest of the leadership activities for the business. When we talked about Meridian bird removal, many of you know these folks. They're raving fans of ours. They have a very unique patented process, if you can believe this, patented, for humanely capturing and relocating birds from places they're not supposed to be. So the next time you see a bird in a Walmart or an airport or any grocery store where you go, oh, that's not going to be good with all that produce. These are the guys who come in. Their only competitors out there are exterminators. So these guys are pretty unique. Again, this CEO, David, is huge around the talent and culture. That's the talent and culture champion is inward facing. Culture ambassador is the outward facing things in his community, some of the sales activities. Some R&D work that he's doing is also some of the things he loves. and then some of the business leadership, which includes some of his strategy stuff. His VP of operations, and by the way, this is posted. He is looking for this role. This is in, all of a sudden I drove a blank, Virginia? West Virginia, Virginia. And that VP of operations will do a lot on Team Meridian, business oversight, again, talent management, strategy and planning, and implementing a lot of the things that come out of the visionary. So when you have this clarity on these roles, the other huge advantage is, imagine how many times historically, in the absence of a process like this, somebody says, I need a second in command, and they bring this person in, and that's when they look at him and go, what am I going to do if you do this stuff? You know what? Once you earn my trust, you learn the business a little bit, then maybe I'll slide some of these responsibilities over to you. Why don't you shadow me for a while? And so somewhere between 12 or 18 months, when the second in command realizes I'm not doing anything of real value, they leave. So now you have a lot of those folks as part of the Great Reshuffle. And imagine the excitement when they realize that the sandbox of the number one and the number two have been clearly identified to avoid that overlap, to avoid handcuffing this person and preventing them from doing the things that they were really brought in to do. And so the attraction ability of having those in the selection process is really significant. As you see here, I told you we're going to wrap a little bit early. If you go to this QR reader, again, you can find some of the handouts. There's actually a website there for you. The recording from this session will be available for you or for anybody else with whom you'd like to share it. And the handouts, and the slides. So you'll have that there. My email, if you want to contact me, is simply cindy@themetissgroup.com. If you go to the website and you're interested in signing up for the newsletter, for the few of you who've never heard of the Monday Minute Minder, it is a newsletter designed to be read in less than a minute. So we really did time it. If it's a video, I obviously like to talk, so it could be a little longer, but not that much longer. So we're going to open this up to questions. If you go to the questions area in your control panel, we'll field some of those.
I have a few. Does the COO need to have industry experience?
That's a great question. Does the CEO need
COO
need to have industry experience? It really depends. We know that when we build out the scorecard, we'll know then. And probably my favorite example, and this actually is on our website, there's an audio of Kurt Rager from Autumn Associates. He has an insurance company, all kinds of insurance, personal lines, commercial, employee benefits, all of that. And so he was ready to bring on his number two. And before we built out the process, and he's been through a process for decades, and he said, Cindy, I'm pretty sure this person coming in is going to have to come from insurance. And I said, Kurt, we don't know that. Wait till we get through the process. So we built out the integrator role, is what he wanted to call it. And I looked at the whole scorecard and I said, Kurt, show me anything on this scorecard that says that they need to come from insurance. And he burst out laughing and he said, nothing. The stuff that they need, we can teach them in a blink. Sure, over time, they'll learn some of the nuances, but there wouldn't be any benefit from them coming from insurance. Interestingly enough, the audio clip of Kurt talking about it is with his integrator, Michelle, and Michelle came out of manufacturing. And I can't tell you how many times Kurt has told me, I can't believe how perfect Michelle is for this role. And had I insisted on the insurance, I wouldn't have even looked at her resume. So the bottom line is it depends, and we won't know until after we built out the integrator role.
Okay. Another one here. How do the number one and number two stay on the same page? You mentioned Mark wants to be on the beach and Engad likes to be on the golf course. How do they say?
Again, another good question. How do we get on the same page? If you've read Traction by Gino Wickman, or rocket fuel, he talks about the visionary and integrator, and he talks about a same page meeting, which is supposed to happen weekly. In our case, we recommend that in the beginning, both the number one and number two should review with each other their scorecards once a month. After you're in a good meeting rhythm, just once a quarter. John and I still do that. I'm the visionary, John's the integrator. We review our scorecards with each other once a quarter to make sure, number one, we're staying in our sandbox. Number two, that the priorities and percentage of time frequently has to shift based on business needs. And if it's not shifting, or if one of us is getting sucked into an area that we're not supposed to, that's one of the reasons we're looking for an assistant for John, because he's getting sucked into areas he shouldn't. We're looking for somebody who can handle more of the tactical stuff for John from a business analyst perspective, from a marketing analyst perspective, and also doing a little co-piloting on building out some of those scorecards.
I have one more here, and it's how long does it normally take to transition the running of the day-to-day to this new person?
Oh, okay, good question. How long does it take to transition the running of the day-to-day? First of all, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. You got to let it happen as soon as they come in. That doesn't mean that you're not glued to them. If you are the number one, let them do it from the moment they come in, but you guys can be providing guidance along the way and doing things together. You're probably meeting 3 times a day, not once a week, as you're fielding everything together. And then little by little, by doing that and by reviewing the scorecard regularly and having those same page meetings, you'll find that your confidence as the number one, or the confidence of all of the other direct reports, is going to go up significantly because they see the person diving in right away. I don't care what the role is, it always takes 3 to 6 months before the individual who took the job feels like they themselves are making a significant contribution. We as outsiders would see it sooner, but that's when they feel that they're really up to speed, even if they've done that job someplace else in the past.
I think we just answered that one. There's one more here, and that is typically the COO or the number two's salary is going to be additional overhead. How is that generally funded within the organization?
Oh, great question. First of all, if you're thinking about it as an expense, you're not ready for it, or you haven't really, you might feel differently once you build out the scorecards. It's really an investment, and as any investment should have a great ROI. So I know you're thinking about pulling this out, and I have to come up with this much more money as overhead. But if they are relieving the number one to be driving more stuff, if they are facilitating success for all of the direct reports, for the salespeople, they're removing obstacles, they're deploying resources, they're shoring up a lot of the processes so there's more efficiencies and things, this person should pay for themselves multiple times over. So it is kind of a leap of faith, but I think if you built out the roles first, you'll know when to pull the trigger and get that done. So oftentimes we can't imagine that because you haven't built out the whole role. And keep in mind, you're trying to think about this in your own head. If you bring in other people into the organization to help you build out that role, and when you see what some of the measurements are for the success factors, which is on the far right-hand side of those scorecards, right? How do we know if somebody's done their job well enough to keep it? They've met or exceeded the metrics. We have zero turnover of A players. We have promotables. We have, all of this other stuff that we can build into that role. You'll know when you're ready. And if it's not right now, you might go, okay, maybe it's 6 months, 12 months from now. So let me, bank a little bit more cash so that we can give them some runway. But you should be getting excited. You'll know when you're ready. And if it's not right now, it won't change. The scorecard won't change much by the time you are ready.
I think that's all we got.
I think that's our questions. So thank you all for hanging in there with us today. Hope you found value with this, and feel free to share this with whomever you like. Remember, on July 20th, we're going to be focusing on your leaders who are aging out or they're maxed out. There's a lot of folks who started their business with their best buddies and said, we're going to lead this company together. We're going to make it great. We're going to run this company together forever. And now you look at them and go, oh my God, you can't leave. So that's the maxed out part. Aging out, we know we're facing that. And then on August 17th, we're going to be doing, we're in the middle of the Great Resignation, now what? So that's the third piece. Again, those will be recorded and available to share. But we hope to get some more feedback from y'all about what's worked and what hasn't. And I don't think we had any snafus on the software. So I'm going to consider this a success today. Have a great one. Thanks so much for hanging with us today.